Our main concern is Jasmine and where she is at. We will not stop until we find her.
What can we do?
She's on your phone plan. Who is she talking to?
The card.
Are you thinking Jasmine could still be inside?
Yes. You're terrified of what you're about to find.
On November 23rd, 2022, at 11:27 at night, a mother watched her daughter's car pull away from a curb in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She had no way of knowing it was the last time she'd see her alive. 3 days later, on Thanksgiving, a post appeared on that daughter's Facebook page. A photo, a caption, "Enjoying Thanksgiving with my baby." To anyone scrolling past, it looked like good news. To her family, it was the first thing that felt wrong, because the woman who supposedly wrote it had already been dead for hours. This is the story of Jasmine Jazzy Pace, and the family who refused to believe a Facebook post over their own instincts. What they'd uncover wouldn't just help solve her murder. In a lot of ways, it's what solved it. Before this was a criminal case, it was a family, in an apartment they weren't supposed to be in, following a trail nobody asked them to follow. There was no history of violence anyone had reported. No prior warning that made sense in hindsight, no single red flag Jasmine's family could point to and say, "We should have known." That's part of what makes this story hard to sit with. Sometimes the people closest to a victim do everything right, watch just as closely as they always have, and it still isn't enough to stop what's already in motion. Before we go any further, if this is your first time with us, this channel walks through a case like this every week, start to finish, no filler. If that's the kind of thing you're after, go ahead and subscribe now so you don't lose the case halfway through. And while you settle in for this one, tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We read every single one, and it's genuinely one of the best parts of putting these together. Jasmine Nicole Pace was born in Chattanooga in the spring of 2000. Everyone who knew her called her Jazzy, and everyone who knew her seemed to describe her the same way, the one who remembered things. Birthdays, small promises, the friend who showed up. By 2022, she was a student at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. She was close, genuinely close, with her parents, Catrina and Travis, and her older sister, Gabrielle. Family wasn't an obligation for Jazzy. Her cousin Jacqueline White would later put it simply, it was unlike her to go quiet, ever. She was also, at the time, in an on-again, off-again relationship with a fellow student, a computer science major named Chen. Nobody in her family thought much of that. Relationships like that exist in every family. It's only in hindsight that on-again, off-again stops sounding ordinary, which is exactly why what happened next didn't sit right with anyone, not for one single day. 2 days before the holiday, Catrina got a text. Jazzy wasn't coming to Thanksgiving this year. She was going to spend it with a friend instead. On its own, that's nothing. People change plans. But Catrina knew her daughter, and Thanksgiving wasn't a plan Jazzy changed. Not after everything the family had just been through. They'd recently lost their great-grandmother, and if anything, that kind of loss usually pulled this family closer together, not apart. Still, a text is a text. There was no reason yet to think anything was wrong. Not yet. That night, Catrina saw Jazzy one more time, briefly, on Tremont Street, near her mother's home. It was ordinary, forgettable, even, in the moment. She got in her car and drove off. No call after that. No text, nothing on social media, from a young woman who was, by every account, reachable. Later, on the stand, Catrina would describe just how unusual that silence really was. She and her daughter weren't occasional check-in kind of close. They spoke and saw each other multiple times a day. So when a single day passed with nothing, she didn't wait to worry. She was already worried. Somewhere in the hours after that drive, prosecutors would later argue Jasmine Pace was killed, stabbed 60 times. But her family wouldn't know any of that for days. All they had was silence, and then, worse than silence, a lie dressed up as good news. On Thanksgiving, something showed up on Jazzy's Facebook. A photo. A caption, "Enjoying Thanksgiving with my baby." No location, no context anyone recognized. For a moment, it might have been a relief. Proof she was fine, just choosing to spend the day elsewhere. Exactly like she'd said. But relief didn't last, because nothing else about the post matched the daughter this family knew. Not the tone, not the timing, not the silence everywhere else. Jacqueline had a phrase she kept coming back to over the next several days. Everyone has an electronic footprint. There are clues everywhere. She just didn't yet know how literally that would turn out to be true. By the days that followed, calls to Jazzy weren't just going unanswered. They weren't going through the way they should have. The family discovered her social media passwords had been changed. Not by Jazzy, they were certain, but by someone else. So they didn't wait on anyone else to move faster. Catrina began pulling what she could from Jasmine's phone and car apps. Location pings, activity logs, anything digital that might say where her daughter actually was. This wasn't a family sitting by a phone. This was a family building a case. Jacqueline would later tell investigators something that stuck with them. This family didn't wait for police to tell them something was wrong. They already knew. When the family reported Jasmine missing, they gave police everything they'd already gathered. The digital trail, the odd post, the boyfriend she'd been seeing. At this point, nobody was calling him a suspect. He was simply the person closest to her, which made him the first person anyone needed to talk to. But this family didn't stop at giving police information. According to a sworn affidavit later filed in the case, Jasmine's parents did something few families would risk. They went to Chen's apartment themselves, and they got inside. What exactly they saw in those first minutes would only fully come out later, in a courtroom. But it was enough to change everything about how urgently this case moved. When they eventually called police, officers told them something telling. They were already working the case. And they gave the family one clear instruction: do not go back into that apartment again. That's not a warning you give about a missing persons case. That's a warning you give about a crime scene. Detective Stephen Bulkley requested a warrant for phone records, Chen's phone records. What came back didn't just raise questions. It built a map. That map pointed toward a stretch of road west of the city, Suck Creek Road, running alongside the Tennessee River. Investigators would later learn Chen had swapped the SIM card in his phone in the days after Jasmine disappeared, and kept using Tinder in that same window. They'd also traced something stranger. 2 days after Jasmine went missing, Chen's phone showed him back in the neighborhood, near his own building, but he never actually went inside. Cell data placed him just a few blocks away, in a small park instead. Police secured his apartment that same night. A search warrant followed less than 2 hours later. Small details. But small details are exactly what this system runs on. Following the phone data, officers searched the area along Suck Creek Road. What they found was a suitcase. Inside, wrapped in 3 layers of trash bags, was Jasmine Pace. She had been shackled and handcuffed. The autopsy would later show 60 stab wounds. One of the officers on scene, Detective Bulkley, would later describe the moment he first felt what was inside, the shape of a shoulder, a torso, and understood, before anyone confirmed it, that the search was over. 9 days. That's how long it had been since Catrina watched her daughter's car pull away. 9 days of a family refusing to accept silence as an answer, and in the end, being right. Chen had actually been arrested before Jasmine's body was even found, taken into custody on November 29th, at his parents' home outside Nashville, as the digital and physical evidence against him mounted. He was 22, a computer science student, to classmates unremarkable. What investigators found inside his apartment and on his devices told a very different story than unremarkable. That story wouldn't be fully laid out until a courtroom, more than 2 years later. Quick pause before we head into that courtroom, because this is where the case really opens up. If you're still with us and haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We've got a new case going up every week, and this one's about to get a lot more layered. And we'd still love to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Type it in the comments. We've had viewers checking in from 6 continents on cases like this one, and it never stops being the best part of reading through them. More than 2 years after Jasmine's death, the trial finally began. The case had drawn enough attention across Chattanooga that a jury was brought in from Nashville instead. 12 jurors and 4 alternates, sequestered for the better part of 9 days. Leading the prosecution was District Attorney Coty Wamp. Representing Chen was defense attorney Josh Weiss. And from the opening statements, it was clear the two sides weren't just disagreeing on details. They were telling 2 completely different stories about the same night. Prosecutor Coty Wamp told the jury this wasn't chaos. It was premeditation, a killing that was planned, not a moment that spiraled out of control. Defense attorney Josh Weiss offered a different account. He said the couple had been together at Chen's apartment when a Tinder notification lit up his phone, and that Jasmine saw it. According to Weiss, an argument followed. He told the jury Jasmine struck Chen with an empty wine bottle, that Chen kicked her, that she came at him again with a wine glass, and that Chen, seeing a knife nearby, said he blacked out. By his account, he came back to himself lying over Jasmine's body. 2 stories. One ends in an accident nobody meant. The other ends in a plan nobody else knew about. It would be up to the evidence, not the narration, to decide which one the jury believed. The state's first witness was Jasmine's mother, Catrina. She told the jury, plainly, what that silence after November 23rd had actually meant, that she and her daughter spoke or saw each other multiple times a day, and that a single day of nothing was already out of character before anyone found a single piece of evidence. Then came the investigators who'd walked into that apartment after the family did. One of them, Investigator Zach Crawford, described finding more blood at that scene than he'd encountered anywhere else in his career. Crime scene investigator Michele Johnson took the jury room by room. The first thing that struck her wasn't dramatic. A coffee table, slightly out of place, not lined up with the couch the way furniture usually settles. Behind that couch, on the floor, she saw what she suspected was blood. Then she saw it again, and again. In her account, it was in nearly every room. She found glass fragments as well. When she used a chemical called Blue Star, a reagent that reacts to even trace cleaned up blood, the reaction was, by her own account, more intense than she had seen it react before. She testified that in her opinion, someone had tried to clean the scene. Investigators found isopropyl alcohol and paper towels, along with a hydrogen peroxide purchase, but no bleach anywhere in the apartment. On cross-examination, the defense pushed back hard, pointing out Blue Star only suggests blood, it doesn't confirm it on its own, and that Johnson hadn't run a confirming test. It was one of several moments where the defense worked to show the jury that fast, imperfect police work had left real gaps in the evidence. Investigator Mark Hamilton walked the jury through Chen's phone, recovered from his parents' home. The SIM card swap, the Tinder activity in the days after Jazzy vanished, records placing him at a Walmart, captured on camera, buying items prosecutors said were used afterward. Surveillance footage was shown to the jury, Chen on camera, near a suitcase. A knife was found on Chen's bed, but when investigators compared it to a broken knife tip recovered during Jasmine's autopsy, they found no indication it was the same weapon, a detail the defense leaned on hard, and one the prosecution never fully explained away. One investigator also testified to something smaller, almost easy to miss, a fresh cut across Chen's palm at the time of his arrest. He called it knife slippage, the kind of injury, he explained, that happens when a blade is used again and again, and a hand loses its grip. Then came a detail that would end up defining the entire case, the handcuffs. Prosecutors argued Jasmine had broken through one of them, fighting to get free. The state told jurors it's broken because Jasmine Pace fought back. The defense pushed back hard on that reading. Weiss argued there were no ligature marks on Jasmine's wrists at all, and that the restraints had been put on her after she was already dead, only to make her fit inside the suitcase. Not evidence of a struggle, evidence of concealment. Not every answer in this case came easily. A forensic analyst from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation later admitted, under questioning, that not every item collected from the scene had actually been tested. The lab works under a strict cap on how many samples it can process per case, and she'd prioritize the ones most likely to answer the state's central questions. It's the kind of detail a documentary could easily leave out. This one won't, because a fair account of any case includes what wasn't tested, not just what was. A latent fingerprint examiner delivered one of the most concrete moments of the trial. A print recovered from the outermost trash bag matched to Jason Chen. The jury would have to decide which explanation matched a woman who fought for her life, and which one was easier to believe if you needed to. In her closing argument, Coty Wamp asked the jury to remember who this trial was actually for. Years from now, she said, don't think of this as the trial of Jason Chen. Think of it as the trial for Jasmine Pace. Jasmine, she reminded them, wasn't a name on an indictment or a photograph in an evidence binder. She was a granddaughter, a friend who never gave up on people, a daughter her parents had raised for 22 years before a single night took all of it away. Jason Chen chose not to testify. The jury would decide his fate without ever hearing directly from him. Jurors began deliberating around 4 in the afternoon. Less than an hour later, they had their answer. Guilty. First-degree premeditated murder. Abuse of a corpse. The decision was unanimous, and in the courtroom, Jasmine's family let out audible sighs of relief. More than 2 years of waiting condensed into one moment. The same jury would return the next day to decide Chen's sentence. The death penalty was never on the table. Their only choice was between life without parole or the possibility of parole after 50 years. They chose life without parole. At sentencing, Jasmine's father, Travis, spoke about everything his family had lost that wasn't just Jasmine herself. The grandchildren she'd never have, the generations of family that would never exist because of one night in November. Her sister, Gabrielle, remembered a woman with an unmistakable warmth, someone who never gave up on the people around her, and never gave up on herself either. One juror later described the case in a way that stayed with almost everyone who's followed it since. In her words, Jasmine Pace solved her own murder. Not because she meant to, but because the digital trail she left behind, the very thing someone tried to use to fake her presence, became the thing that proved she was gone. It wasn't quite over even then. Chen's defense would go on to request a new trial, arguing the verdict didn't match the evidence presented. A judge reviewed that request and denied it. The conviction stood. By the time it was over, this had become one of the most closely followed murder cases Chattanooga had seen in years. Enough that a jury had to be brought in from another county just to find 12 people who hadn't already formed an opinion. National true crime coverage would eventually revisit it too. But long before any of that attention arrived, it was just a mother pulling location data off an app at her kitchen table, and a cousin telling anyone who'd listen that a person's phone doesn't lie, even when the person using it does. We've told you what the evidence showed, and what two very different stories tried to explain about the same night. What you make of it from here, that part's yours. What's not up for debate is this. A family noticed something was wrong before a single alarm went off anywhere else. They didn't wait for permission to start looking. And they didn't wait for permission to walk through a door they probably shouldn't have. And a fake Thanksgiving post, meant to buy a few more days of silence, ended up being one of the first cracks in the case. Before we close this one out, if you made it this far, thank you for sitting with this case the way it deserved to be sat with. If you're not subscribed yet, that's the easiest way to catch the next one the moment it's up. And one last time, let us know where you're watching from tonight. Somewhere out there, we'd guess, is someone who watches every case we cover, and we'd genuinely like to know who you are. Jasmine Pace was 22. She's remembered by everyone who knew her as the one who always made time. Her family made sure the rest of the world would have to make time for her story too.